Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the Divorce Unplugged podcast. We're back today, and we're going to talk about something that might interest you. It's actually pretty cool. It's what people don't tell you about the divorce process. So I think everybody that's going through a divorce or has been through one should definitely be listening, like, and subscribe.
Everybody, Keegan Burke. You may recognize me as Divorceology on all the socials. And I do want to get out ahead of our disclosures and disclaimers, and that is this isn't legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. This is a conversation. I'm a coach and really focused on the strategy in which you work through the process of divorce. And by the way, we're going to label this one Divorce 101.
Very good. Yes. And hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Cox. You might recognize me as the family law liaison. I am actually an attorney, but not your attorney. And I'm also a coach and a strategist. And that is where my passion's at. And I'm not giving you legal advice today.
So let's kick it off with a really quick example for each of us because we've both been through the system. We have
Yeah.
our own horror stories. We help a lot of people. Give me an example of a WTF moment that jumps out at you that you can tell us about.
Oh, my goodness. There's so many. But um, for a little bit of disclosure, I went through the system with a young child, somebody that was possibly labeled as an infant. And when I walked in with my 3-month-old infant to our temporary order hearing, the judge looked at my attorney and said, "Well, I didn't even read your pretrial statement." Now, let's keep in mind, this woman came from oil and gas. Why is she in family court?
Yeah, that is a WTF moment.
Yeah. What? You
and
didn't
you
read it? You don't even know why we're here.
And it's the worst because they get up there and you're like, they say to you, "Well, what are we here for?" It's like, "Well, we're in family court. That's one, and the issue is this, and you should already know that."
Right.
Um, Too funny. Mine is probably one that was years ago, but we had a hearing, an evidentiary hearing. It was moved to a trial, and it was going to trail, and trailing just means continued.
Mm.
And on the morning of trial, mind you, I had been continued 6 months, so I was sitting waiting for trial. The morning of trial, unbeknownst, unannounced, until we arrived at court, the judge recused himself for undisclosed reasons, and
Oh,
he is the
no.
one who had been making prejudicial rulings and findings along the way. So that was
Wow.
a WTF moment, and by the way, that move continued our hearing or trial, another 6 months. So,
Okay,
let's get
so
into
wait, but inquiring minds need to know. Just
yeah,
like I know it was your thing, but and if I'm bringing up anything that you don't wanna answer, that's fair, but, like, why does a judge just recuse themselves? Do you have
I
any
don't
thoughts?
know. We are uncovering some new things just as we go back through, and listen, one thing just to know about divorce is it's dynamic and it almost feels like it never ends, right? In child custody
Never.
more specifically, but it feels like it never ends. And we are uncovering some things that are
Okay.
they're not black and white, but it's certainly that raises a few eyebrows.
Right.
But he didn't disclose it, didn't share anything. It was a very big surprise.
I made a judge recuse themselves, but that's another episode.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes that's something you need to do.
Right, and I did.
So all right, so let's just talk about, some of these big kind of key considerations that we sort of are always talking about because it's divorce, right? It's divorce unplugged.
Right.
But the machine, and we know it's broken. But what are some of the things that we need to keep in mind getting into the process? And I think the first thing for me is, you know, most people don't realize this, but family court's just civil court.
Yeah.
But it feels like criminal court.
Of course.
because you feel like you don't have the same protections and standards that criminal court does. So
Mhm.
you have to keep that in mind. And then obviously the one we talked about earlier, and that is everything in every state and jurisdiction is considered or named a different acronym, a different
Right.
thing, a different process. But there are general frameworks for all courts around family law that you need to be aware of. So it's really more about accountability when you get into the process. Recognize that there are things you're going to have to know, things you're going to have
Right.
to do, and you have to do them at the right time. That
Right.
matters. That matters probably more than you would imagine, because if you
Timing. Yes.
don't, that time, listen, family court loves the delay. They love to extend, they love to push it out. And that goes back to what we've talked about, and that's the RICO element. That's the cost, that's the incentive, that's the business of family court.
Mhm.
And ultimately, for us as victims of it, it's the expense.
Oh, yes, for sure. Absolutely, the expense.
So, question, temporary orders,
Ooh, it
are
is.
they temporary?
No, typically they aren't. So that's what I try to coach all of my clients on is and that's why you need a coach again from the beginning. If you're going through a divorce, if you're thinking about going through a custody dispute, you definitely need a coach because you need to know what you want going in before you even find your attorney. Because typically your temporary orders are going to end up being your final orders unless you can strategize so well, like I myself and you, I'm sure, Keegan, to change that. Because
Mhm.
the judge doesn't even know your case. Like I just said, on my temporary orders, guess what the judge said? Like, I didn't even read your pretrial statement. We don't know. So I my child that was an infant was very young and I it was during COVID and I was nursing, was taken from me and given to the co-parent on a 50-50 basis, and he had no idea what he was doing, but the judge didn't care.
And it's interesting too, because it's also a misstep, I think, for a lot of people, or things that they don't recognize. Judges are, they will. So let me back up. Your point was great in that you went into a hearing, judge didn't read your pleadings, right?
Right.
And the flip side of that is some people believe that they don't really need to put the important information and data in their pleadings because they're going to have their time in court.
They're not.
That's also wrong.
That is
Judges
a
make rulings all the time without full evidence, without full hearings, without full arguments, and sometimes they read the pleadings and they already have their rulings in mind.
right.
Sometimes their clerks have even, or their legal aides have already prepared some position or opinion that they're going to rule on before you step foot in the courtroom. So that's a big one. And I think to close out this particular topic, it is not about justice in family law. It's about procedure.
Right, they have to. It's procedure, and you and I talked about it. I saw a case, one of my clients in California, specifically California, I feel like, as an offender. But,
Mhm.
you go in and you represent yourself, and you fill out all your paperwork, and everything's great, and then you didn't check one box and you get in front of your judge and you've waited for so long, but you didn't check that box and now all of a sudden it was just dismissed and you have to
Yep.
start over.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, you can refile at the window.
Right.
And, and
Sounds like
it's
you
funny
have
because
some experience there.
it's the perfect segue into things that people get wrong, right? Like, what do we think about family court? And one of them is, missing the particulars on your court forms,
Right,
and it's really hard. And by the way, attorneys sometimes miss those things.
right.
So I think it's one of those places where having a coach who is able to put the time in and dot the i's and cross the t's
You
can save
just
you in some of those
said
situations.
exactly what I was going to say. That's where a coach is helpful,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Exactly.
So things people get wrong. I can point out serving documents, right? The timing, the method, proof of service,
Yes.
um, filing deadlines. This, oh my, this is like the most common, right?
Okay. I
Is
wanna then I'm gonna talk about service, but you do
Yeah, do it.
deadlines. Mhm.
No, I was just gonna say missing deadlines is I see it all the time.
Service. So, I mean, again, we're talking about California a little bit and some other states, but 2 situations where there was one, like, order of protection that was to be like, served, and it could just never get served on this person, and, I mean, we tried several options and even used a PI, not saying that everybody should, but this person, we could just not get served. So at what point does the court system say, "Okay, you're now evading service. Okay,
Mhm,
so now what are we gonna do? We're just gonna say that this is good service." That kinda thing can happen. But honestly, like, I had a case where a man, sorry, it was a father that took 3 children for a whole year. We could
mhm,
not we filed so many what you like to call RFOs, request
mhm.
for order, and it was emergency temporary ex parte, but if we couldn't file and serve the actual person that had the children, they couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
So it was crazy. So those are, I mean, I feel like right now we're telling people how to, like, evade service, but, I mean, service is a big issue, and so make sure you can get somebody served.
Yeah, and service is the methods, and there some scenarios you can serve in some ways,
Right.
and I
Yep.
have experience with the opposing side in my case. The evasion of service is
Right.
like, constant.
Right.
Um, the other one too that I think people get wrong is the use of or the misuse of ex parte applications.
Oh my goodness.
Um, they use them like, they're popping a, piece of gum,
Right.
and it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money,
I know. I
it's a
have a
waste of your reputation in front of that judge,
yes.
right?
Or the
Um
attorneys. So I have a
mhm,
situation where I'm coaching someone, and she said that she wanted to relocate and she was gonna give the 60 to 30-day notice. It's a complicated case. They're using a very old court order in Washington, living in California. So she did the right thing, alerting the other co-parent that she wanted to move within, I don't know, 15 or 20 miles, and it wasn't going to affect his parenting time. He immediately, and his attorney, which I'm like, filed an ex parte. What? This is not an emergency. She
mhm,
wasn't going to leave within the next 2 days. She was
mhm,
giving you 30 to 60 days
mhm.
then to file an RFO for a relocation. So those people that were right in front of the judge were like, the judge was like, this is not an emergency. And that's exactly what I told my client when she was panicked. The emotional support was, don't worry, this is not an emergency. It's not going to fly.
Yep, yep. And the other one that I think jumps out all the time, people get wrong, is a verbal agreement means
Oh
it's
God.
enforceable and binding. Get it in writing at the very least. Not even that that's necessarily enforceable, but at least it sets a precedent to make an argument in a courtroom. If you don't have it in writing, it's fugazi, right?
Right. I mean, we can go back to my like it contracts, the statute of frauds, it's an express contract. Get it in writing.
Mhm,
Yes.
totally. What about enforcement in your experience? Believing court orders are mean enforcement, and I think that's a false concept that a lot of people don't understand, right? Enforcement's different than an order.
Right. And so are you actually discussing or talking about like child support orders? Those are
No,
hard
like
to enforce?
even custody orders, right?
Uh-huh.
Somebody can break an order and doesn't mean you get to enforce it until you get back in front of a court.
Well, right, and then so you have to pay for a hearing, and it's called
Mhm,
a contempt hearing usually, because that person's in contempt, and
mhm,
then even when you get there, they may have very little repercussions, and they may not even make them pay for the hearing.
right.
So they know or they think that they can always violate the court order. So many people don't follow the court order.
Yep. I see a lot of times scenarios where the other party will be in contempt and there are motions on calendar for certain relief, and they're doing some outrageous things that are like black, because contempt's sort of a high bar to go get, a contempt order. But if you file a contempt or motion in California, it pauses your other matters because
It
you've
comes
got an
first.
incrimination factor. And so these people who are breaking the court order with other motions on calendar run amok and as
Wow.
strategically,
Okay, yeah.
because you can't go, you should file for contempt, but you're going to push everything out another 3, 6 months. It's always that timing and that delay.
Okay, that's interesting on that. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
I have not seen any situation where the contempt was so serious that there was really any repercussion.
Yeah. No,
Um,
they never
so you're
land.
just actually the one filing for contempt, paying for the hearing, and then they're slapping the person on the hand.
Exactly right. Which, by the way, having a coach is going to be the first person to say, don't waste your time in this scenario.
It's
An
not worth it.
attorney is going to say, yes, waste your time in this scenario. 5 grand, 10
Right.
grand.
Yeah, or 7 to 8 or whatever it is for that contempt. Exactly.
Yep.
I'm with you on
Yep.
that.
All right. So let's get into a little bit. I don't want to go deep because this is a whole episode in and of itself, and that's the financial fallout or economics of um, divorce 101. Uh, I think that people need to recognize, again, having a coach makes this a lot easier, that attorney's fees can
Right.
and almost always will exceed your asset pool every day of the week.
Absolutely.
Um, the amount of money we have
Absolutely.
both collectively spent on our cases is astronomical. Um, and I think generally that is one of the first places people really misunderstand or misprepare, um, economically speaking. Um,
Right.
and so, any thoughts
Well,
on
and
that?
like you said, well, my thoughts were, and I tell my clients this, I think that coaches do a really good job of keeping the billable hours down. I think that we help
Mhm.
them to send clear and concise emails to their attorneys asking exactly what they want, not spending hours on the phone, wasting billable hours. And also, we provide emotional support so that they don't have to call their attorney and schedule 5 calls a week and then pay another, 5 hours of billable hours there. So, and we also strategize to help them save their money in areas where it's not necessary, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
things that attorneys want aren't necessary.
Right. They're incentivized just to carry the water in any direction that you want. And listen, a lot of our clients and a lot of people generally want things that they either shouldn't want or won't get. So, you're like
Right,
chasing your tail. I'm actually going to change this topic. We started with economics, but I think this is probably one of the bigger reasons uh, that we should be talking about having a coach and where a coach actually has an impact. And it is on economics, right? It's on, for example, evaluating the cost of litigating versus
right,
settling, right? How far apart
exactly,
are we? What do we really want to try to accomplish? And also for both parties, men or women, right? The reality of divorce and the cost of it is you two have built a pool of assets, and those
right,
assets are being depleted by both of you.
depleted,
So if the man's paying attorney's fees, okay, great. The woman thinks that she's not paying for the attorney. Guess what? Your estate is. And vice versa if it's the woman.
that's a good point.
So
And the
it's
kids,
one of those
the
things.
children are paying because they could be getting the money somewhere else
Right?
too.
Totally, totally. Um, I think the other thing that is probably an unrealistic expectation around economics is that spousal support is fair or equals fair. And I think that probably rings true for the man and the woman. Um, fair isn't fair, right? And that's not the reality of spousal support and family law,
No.
period.
I mean, I have a client that is paying somebody a large amount of spousal that is more than capable of working, purposely didn't work and hid, his assets, and then it just goes on and on. So I've
Yeah.
seen it in not just women, but
Mhm.
men. And I do think, though, that spousal is something that should continue in certain circumstances. I mean, you can talk whether it's a man or a woman, but people that stay home and take care of children and give up their careers or are no longer have the same training they did before, they need help to get back on their feet. I think spousal is absolutely a good thing.
Sure. Uh, I'm not I agree, in that there needs to be some consideration for a person that you've built a life with and making sure that, they are able to at least spread their wings and fly, if you will. Um, okay, so we
Or
talk
and
about this all the time, but
But
hidden
I think
costs.
the child support, we missed on that too. So I do think if
Okay.
somebody has more resources, obviously is the breadwinner, has more money than another, I still think that child support should be fairly given so that the children can still have the same type of life that they would had the family stayed together. I know
That's
that's a
where
tough
we
one.
disagree.
I know that's a tough one, but I still have I that is what I believe in.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I appreciate that perspective. I disagree with it, and I only disagree with it in that it does, in a lot of situations, incentivize separation versus working it out.
Oh,
Because
I
the
never thought of that.
reality is, you know, it, you separated, and so life is different and life is going to change. And child support is specific to the child's needs. And I'm a believer that both parties need to contribute to their child's needs equally. And so the responsibility, like it or not, if you separate, lands on both parties. And the equalization of lifestyle is that was the lifestyle that the parties got to share together, and they don't get to share it in a separated environment. Now, I get the point that, well, the kid is going to have a better life in one spot and a lesser life in another, and
That's a hard one.
that's a
Yeah.
tough one, right? No doubt. But I'm really against the whole equalization notion. However, right, if we're talking about the spread your wings and fly, if the other party is really in a position where they're like, okay, I need to go do XYZ, you get the support, you get that point, you're getting to where maybe you have an equal lifestyle or close. Child support to me is childs need things, they need to be covered, and both parties need to contribute to that.
Okay. I hear
So
you. I I can't disagree in some areas, but I think there are some times when there are differentials and a lot of my clients where one party just makes so much more than the other, and then I think that that needs to be equaled out.
yeah, I hear that. I hear that, and I think that there's probably way more we would need to unpack
Right.
around it. And I think there are lots of varying considerations, but it goes back to our original point. The system, the algorithms, the calculations, the process is wrong, right? In
Right.
my mind, it's just pure garbage math. It's not just black and white the way they try to make it. Um, so you know,
Right.
fair. We
Exactly.
we agree to disagree to some level on this one.
Yeah. That's okay. That's fair.
All right, hidden costs. What are some examples of costs that people have no idea or consider?
Well, just some of the funniest hidden costs are like, emails, a phone call. How about I mean, I thought the transcriptions, that was kind of a hidden
Mm,
cost to me. Um, yeah, just like the little things that pop up. You know,
Filing fees,
there you
even
go, filing fees.
serving when you have to serve people, um, OFW subscriptions, right? You're talking,
Yeah,
parents' platforms, those are costs. Um, Missed work. I mean,
yeah,
my
well,
first year, I think we were in court. I've mentioned it, I think it's over 20 days. I mean, you
wow.
can't have a job and be in
Right.
court all day long only for your 10 minutes of time in front of the judge.
Yep.
Um, the other one, the professionals that get appointed to your case.
Oh, those are huge. That's the biggest hidden cost. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's really one of those things that you're not just splitting the house, right? You
no,
are splitting stability, income, and
everything.
it takes a lot of planning. And it's really goes back to why you need a coach. What
Right,
are your priorities? What can you afford? What do you want to spend the most money on? I'll give you an example.
right. You can
And because I coach
bifurcate.
all the time, right? And I bring this up all the time. Child support, it's a topic, right? In my mind, you can spend 10, 20, $30,000 for an attorney to represent you in child
Right.
support court, or you can put that money to your child timeshare case because the impact on child support is governed mostly by the time that you have your kids.
And so it's interesting because you're in a different state. So we call it bifurcating or taking
Mhm.
just one piece of the puzzle and doing that trial or hearing first and
Yeah.
figuring that out. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
agree. And also, like we talk about, I think another crazy hidden cost is mediation.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
think that that's like the answer, but $20,000 later, you're sitting in a room for 8 hours and you still don't have anything that's close enough to make a settlement.
Totally right. Totally right. I think
Yeah,
that's a great one. Um, and I think ultimately too, it's the cost of divorce is just expensive.
it is.
Period. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's expensive. Okay.
That wraps it up.
So
Expensive. Everybody needs to know that.
yeah.
It is expensive. You're not going to get out without paying a lot of money.
Yep. Yep. Totally. So I like to kind of pull away our takeaways on the heels of our chat.
Okay.
And so the things I have written down, uh, divorce is part legal, part tactical, and a lot of psychological warfare. And so making sure you've got the right people around you and you're making the right decisions is really important. And I think that starts with a coach, even before you have an attorney.
100%. It is get a coach and then line up your emotional support groups.
Yeah. And that parlays into if you don't understand the procedure in your state or in your jurisdiction, then you are flying blind. And just because you have an attorney doesn't mean you're going to understand the procedure, and they can only do so much.
Exactly.
And then the other one that I have written down is, the economics of divorce is a lot like quicksand, right? You sink slowly and then suddenly it's you run out of gas. It's like that the gas meter's at a quarter tank, an eighth of a tank, and then it's empty in the last, the next 3 miles. So
Agree.
you have to plan ahead, you have to have a strategy, and that always trumps emotion when it comes to planning is really making sure that you understand where you're going and how you're going to get there.
I know. The takeaway exactly is strategy. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways as coach and going through it was there are going to be times that you win a hearing. There are going to be times that emotion is granted, and there's going to be times that it's not. And you're going to see ups and downs, and it's never a clear win. There's never a win. Nobody
Perfectly
ever
put.
wins in this game.
Perfectly put. I always say to folks is you will lose a battle or
Yes.
two or three, but ultimately it's a war. And so keeping your eye on the prize, but knowing what that prize is, and in my mind, it's freedom, it's your kids, it's your finances, it's your rights, all of those things bundled into one. Um, but yeah, you are definitely going to take some licks along the way.
Yes. and
So,
expect them.
yeah, expect them is right.
Mhm.
So, I would say that wraps us. Any
It does.
final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it all in Divorce 101. Everybody should listen. Again, anybody going through a divorce or about to go through a divorce,
Mhm.
definitely start listening to our podcast. We have so many good gems of information for you. So, hope you guys had a great time listening, and please like, subscribe, and we have an episode out every Thursday. So, can't wait to see you again soon.
Tune in. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.